everyone. I'm Fernell Miller.
And I'm Dr. Jen Sell.
I'm Erin Jones.
And this is a podcast about all the things.
And we are literally going to talk about everything, all the things.
Today's podcast, we are going to focus on how we show up for one another in moments when, bigotry is on blast. How do we show up for our friends when stuff goes down, whether it's racism or sexism or ableism or whatever the ism is? We're going to talk today about how we show up for one another. This is just a conversation. So welcome to the conversation.
That's right.
I like that, Erin. Bigotry on blast. There's a title for you. I like that.
Bigotry on blast, for sure. Boy.
So tell us about your experience, Erin. I got to be fortunate to be in your pocket while this was going down live for you. So let's dive into it. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So this podcast idea for our very first podcast came out of real life, very recent experience. And it's an experience that I wish I could say it was my first experience like this. It's not my first experience, but this experience took place in a way and in a place that I wasn't expecting it. I was kind of prepared for this to happen outside of my own neighborhood, but it happened just 6 houses away from me. So at the time of this recording, we are 3 weeks out from an election that, as we all know, was a hot mess for a lot of reasons. And hot mess. But my community that I live in is really purple. And so on one side I literally live on one side of the train tracks, and on the other side are Confederate flags and QAnon signs and just some stuff. In my neighborhood, we're pretty diverse because it's a military neighborhood. And when the election happened, my parents, who are super protective, I know I'm almost 50, but I still listen to my parents, and they were like, we do not want you running outside of your neighborhood because we just don't trust people during this election cycle. And so being good, Erin, I did not run outside I'm a runner. I like to run 3 or 4 times. I did not run for 2 weeks. I ran in place in my house, or I ran around the block a million times.
For those of you who don't know, there is not a day that goes by that Erin's legs are not running, walking at least 30,000 steps or more.
I know, right? So in place, I mean, that was what you run, like 25 miles? Like, it's like a lot
of steps inside my house.
A lot of miles.
My carpet is wore out.
I know.
Anyway, but I decided, I had already kind of gone out and ran outside my neighborhood at this point because it was, my parents said 2 weeks. So the week of the election, the week after, I'm an obedient child. So I waited in my neighborhood for the week of the election, the week after. I went for a run outside my neighborhood. It was all good. No honking or anything like that. And then this last Saturday, a week ago, so 3 weeks after the election, I did my biggest keynote speech ever. So I am a public speaker. I spoke to thousands of people at a student activities conference, national conference. I'm so excited and fired up, and I did a great job. And I was like, I need to get my steps in, because y'all know I need to get my steps in. So I went out to walk by myself in my neighborhood. I was not going anywhere. I was just going to go down the street. That's
where you
all.
have lived for 15 years.
Right. I live here. My husband is a head football coach here. Like, this is my home. And I get literally around the corner, and there's a little boy. And I have to say his color because I think that matters in this context. It's a little white boy. And he and I are the only 2 people on the street. And I always make eye contact with little kids, well, with anyone. But he was making eye contact with me while holding a toy gun. And he was holding the toy gun and pointing it directly at me. And I grew up in a house in Europe where we didn't play with guns. I was taught, like, if people had guns, you don't point them at people. My dad hunted deer when he was a little guy, so we learned to shoot shotguns in the summertime when we visited Minnesota, but it was always at like a rock or something somewhere. It was never, my dad always said, you don't ever point even a toy gun at a person. And so my immediate response is, oh, you don't point guns at people. So I said, being a teacher, I said, hey, little man, please don't point that gun at me. It's not nice to point guns at people. And he yelled at me from across the street, I am not pointing at you. And his face was all scrunched up. And I was like, okay, well, you are. And he says, I'm pointing it at the tree. And there was a tree next to me. And then there wasn't, because I was still walking. So now there's not a tree, but his gun is still trained on me. And I am just looking at him like, little boy, I know you're pointing at me. And he keeps his gun pointed at me all the way down the street until I turn the corner with his face all scrunched up. And I happen to be about to call my friend in Hawaii. And so I'm on the phone with her now as I round the corner, and I just feel nauseous. And I mean, it's a little guy, 8 years old probably. And I'm feeling nauseous. Like I don't even know how to explain it, but it's like he'd called me a name or something. It just felt really icky in my own neighborhood. And I'm telling her about the story. And then it hit 2:00. And Fernell and I are always on the phone at 2:00 on Saturday. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to go. I've got to call it too. And I get on the phone with Fernell, who's also a teacher. And I tell her what just happened. And she and I began to have a conversation about what it's like to be Black women and Black mothers and Black teachers. And I will turn it over to Fernell to share about our phone conversation.
So, oh my goodness. So we're walking. I'm FaceTiming. I can see Erin walking, and her breathing is like, okay, I don't know what to do. I feel icky. I'm about to throw up. I don't know what to do. And she's telling me this scenario that happened. And so first I say, well, how far are you from home? Where's your husband? Can he come, find you, pick you up? Or if you got to go back by the house? And so we started going through these scenarios. Here we are. We're just trying to go for a walk and have an educator meeting. And now all of a sudden we're escalated to the point of, I don't know how I'm going to recover from this now. Because first the scenario is, if that were an equal and opposite situation, a Black child pointing a gun out in the street at anybody, let alone anybody white, the response, the reaction, the what you could do, the options of what you could do or what would happen, we've seen play out on the news and in life literally for way too long. So we know that, Erin, you should probably can't call the police, because if they show up, then the whole situation is now she's traumatized, but then now she's going to be, blamed for what happened, or she's overreacting and it's just a gun, it's just a toy, and then she's attacked twice. So that's not an option. Okay, so we can drive back by, don't go confront the parents unless, you've got somebody there with you. And so, and as we're trying to talk and figure it out, here we are, she's now rounded the route, and we're going back by, hoping maybe the little guy's not there, and we're just going to, try to scoot past here and get home. But nope, he's still there. And this is where, Erin decide, we decide, gosh, we should at least tell the parents, because this is a dangerous thing for anybody of any color. Your child's outside playing with a gun in our climate of what's going on now, and especially where we live, what Erin just described, the purple place of where she's walking. And so as she walks up, she says, hey, would you get your mom? I want to talk to your mom. And you know how kids, when they are in trouble and they run inside, he knows what he was doing. And so she comes out, the mom comes to the door, and Erin just says, hey, I just want to let you know, this happened. Your kid pointed a gun at me. It was, not safe, not it made me feel some kind of way. I just wanted you to let you know what's going on. Heads up out in your yard with your kid. And before I could even hear her voice, I could see the defensiveness. I mean, we get into this place where we're backed in the corner, and first, you don't want anybody telling you what your kid did. And so there's already that defense. Right. But Erin was she was just humanizing herself to the mom. Hey, I'm a teacher. My husband are teachers. I just want to look out for him. And I don't want him, this to cause a big scene. This is, obviously, not okay. And just the words that I heard her spew, at Erin was, she was trying to maybe have a conversation with her son, but the son was yelling inside the house, I didn't do anything. So again, this tells you why he's outside in the yard doing what he's doing, because he's inside the house doing so she's not getting very far. And she tries to say, well, say you're sorry, and he's spitting and spewing, and oh, that wasn't good enough. And I'm hearing questions like, well, are you telling me this because you're Black? I'm like, and Erin says, no, this is about safety. This is about public safety. This is not okay for anybody. And I want you to know what's going on out here in your yard and how that made me feel, and how, this could be a really horrible thing. And just that I could feel and see her face just pinch and be tight, and not even be able to just, oh my gosh, thank you for telling me, or
Right.
none of that was coming across. And at this point, Erin was trying to humanize herself to the little boy who was, inside the house. Are you calling me a racist? I'm like, nobody said anything about race, but your mother. This is about safety, and Erin's trying to ask, what's your name? Oh, that's my favorite name. And I'm sorry we're meeting on these circumstances. I wish we could meet in better terms, but I just want you to know this is safety. My husband and I are teachers. Well, how long have you lived in this neighborhood? Gosh, you know what? You've seen me walk past here for 15 years. I was here and welcomed you on the day you moved in, and you're going to pretend you don't know me now. And so it was that whole kind of conversation. So Erin here's, trying her best, and you know how she is, just so kind, and eyebrows up, and curious, and just wanting to get to the bottom of things. She's not trying to cause a fight. She's trying to help you not have your son, make a mess of your whole life because he's playing with this gun in the yard. And so I just coach her from the pocket, like, walk away, thank you, say thank you, goodbye, walk away. And as she's walking away, I don't hear her breathing. And I'm like, come on, Erin, I need a breath. Come on, take a breath, baby. Give me a breath. I need to hear it. It took about a full minute for me to hear her breath go to be able to like gather herself again. So it got her back on her porch. She's just, crying, and just, this is the kind of trauma that has happened over and over and over again in silence. And I'm thinking about all our kids in school, our babies who are sitting there in class while this kind of trauma is happening to them. That questioning, the why are you bringing this up? And you are, the kids don't have a way to even navigate that. And here is, Erin, public speaker. She teaches about this for a living, and it doesn't even matter. She's reduced to, tears and, an ounce of humanity, because the woman can't see her, can't acknowledge her existence, her humanity, the vulnerability, her own son. And kids are, they got all kind of things going on, but, and Erin, you were there, and you can tell, more of what you saw the boy in, the condition.
Well, and I mean, the other reality is this little boy, they have an autism sign on their door. And I asked the mom right up front, is your son, is this little guy out here autistic? And she says, yes. And I said, oh, I have a son who's autistic too. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So that's how I started out from the very beginning. Wow. Okay, I understand. And here's what I'll say. We have spent so many hours and days working with our son, because we know that at 8 years old, those behaviors can be forgiven and they're excusable. But by the time he's 12 and 14 and 18,
it'll cost his life.
That is no longer something that we can just, and so I want to acknowledge that I recognize that because he's autistic, this is a hard thing. And for this parent, but I wanted her to understand, I know this because I have a guy with autism. So this is not something that is mysterious to me at all. And that did not matter. That did not matter at all.
Well, she can't see the costs. The costs are so different to your son than they are to hers. And she couldn't even see them in that moment.
Yeah. So, one of the things that, and I'd love to hear, Jen, from you about this, but one of the things that it became so apparent to me in that moment and after, and in the week that we've had now afterwards, is the power of having Fernell in my pocket.
Yeah.
Right. And just Fernell's willingness to be in my pocket, and not only her willingness, her insistence on remaining in my pocket. Right. and just how that's really what an ally does, is you stay in the pocket of someone, right? And so as I think about even, and then you, Jen, texted me later and said, you checked in. How are you doing, Erin? So I'd love to hear from you, you know, as you think about being a white person in this work, you know, how do you show up and stay in the pocket? Because you've done a lot of this. I mean, you've been in my pocket too. So in other ways, you've been in my pocket. And so I'm just curious from your perspective, as you hear this story, like, what does it remind you of? What are some experiences you've had where you've been able to be in the pocket of someone, or even where someone's been in the pocket for you?
Yeah.
And before you answer, Jen, I have to tell Erin, after I got you back to your porch and to your family and all, then I went on the phone and I got Jen in my pocket, because then I need somebody to help me breathe after that, because I was traumatized being in your pocket. I'm like, oh, who am I going to reach out to? So I called Jen to say, okay, I'm just going to breathe here for you a minute. This just happened. And you know, obviously y'all know each other. We know each other. And so I was just thankful to be able to pull someone out of my I haven't always been able to do that. I have not always been able to do that. And so I'm thankful for that. Just like, okay, who can I reach for right quick? And so thank you.
I was so grateful to be available. And Fernell, I mean, you reached out earlier, and when Fernell reached out and said, are you busy right now? And I just said I was running errands, and so then she didn't call me, and then later she called me, and I was like, oh, this is what was happening. And so I said, hey, listen, if this is going on,
call now.
tell me, like, errands are nothing. Like, I don't want to say I'm running errands and then find out that this is what's happening. So that's one thing I know for sure. Like, as an ally, I don't want to be like, oh, I'm going to prioritize going to Home Depot over that's not what
you're not always sure. Like, you know, I don't want to burden people. I'm like, this happens so often. It's like, if I had to talk about these things that happened to me, I'd never stop talking. I'd never stop talking.
No, so, for sure. But then you get to decide, right? Like, it's not me imposing myself. You get to make that decision. If you know that I'm okay at any time you doing that, you get to make that decision.
And thank you. Yes.
Right. Of course. Because I know that this happens to you so much that you have to make those decisions all the time about how much you want to talk about it. But I mean, I think that's some of it for me about being an ally around this kind of stuff is sometimes letting go of the things that are happening to me. Like, I was at a bus stop one time when there was a person who was making racist comments, and I was there with a bunch of other people, and there were mostly Black and brown people there, and I was like, so I intervened and I said, hey, knock it off. And then they started attacking me with all this homophobic, all this stuff, and I was just like, okay, well, whatever. Like, you've stopped being racist now. So you know, and it shifted the perspective, and I actually was like, okay, I can deal with this actually a little bit better than what was happening, because what was happening was impacting 30 people here, and what's happening now I'm more used to, and I was at my place of work. I was in my comfort zone. I was in a place where I felt okay. And so for me, that shift felt like, okay, I can handle this. I'm all right. I'm safe where I am right now. And so that intervention to me felt more important than worrying about what was happening. So sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's saying, call me if I'm running an errand. Sometimes it's not knowing what to say, but just saying, I'm here.
Yeah.
I find that a lot of allies, or people who want to be allies, get stuck there. Like, they're not sure what the right thing is to say, and so they're quiet.
Yeah.
And I think I learned that just through the George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, that whole season, is the silence of my people I thought were friends of mine that were, And it wasn't silent because they didn't care. It was silent because they didn't have the perfect thing to say.
Yeah.
But that desire to have the perfect thing to say made them absolutely unavailable to me to help me in any way.
Yeah.
And so,
Perfectionism.
right, that perfectionism that's just killing us all.
That's
right?
one of the things, the mountain of things that's on the
It
mountain
is.
of the things is you don't
Right.
have to be perfect in the way you show up and care. You just have to show up and care.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean,